Page 218, Luke, the brain. I'd visited the hospital several times, but never once had I gone to the waiting room. Not until I sat in there with my class on brain surgery day. Sat for hours. The room had a nice layout. The architects had found a way to maximize, dollar word, the area while keeping a large perimeter. The room represented a rectangle with little sections of the wall jutting into the interior here and there. This created corners and smaller spaces within the larger room. I figured this was important because people wanted privacy. At least, that was how it felt while I waited. The next chapter is Danielle, the pushover. We sat together in the waiting room. I sat next to my mother. We left Grandma home, not knowing how she would handle being in the company of Terry and Anna. Anna sat across from us, next to her mother. A large wooden coffee table rested in the middle of everyone. It reminded me of our class meetings. We didn't form a circle on the floor, and we didn't have a microphone, but it was close enough, except no one talked. Mr. Terupt always started our meetings, so we sat silent until Anna spoke up, thank goodness. But after Luke answered her question, no one else talked. At least not until Jeffrey surprised us. He put our class microphone in the middle of that big wooden table. I stared at it. Then I looked at Jeffrey. How did he know to bring it? Just a hunch, he said. I noticed that he and Jessica were looking at each other. I reached down and took the microphone. Remember the first time Mr. Terupt brought this out? I said. I passed the microphone to Lexi. I was like, Teach was such a weirdo, she said. But it turned out to be pretty cool, sort of like the grass thing. 77,537,412, Luke reminded us. That grass project was awesome. The microphone moved around our square, and we shared different stories and memories. It was perfect. Then a doctor came into the waiting room. The next chapter is Jessica, the new girl. Act 11, Scene 2. Enter a man wearing a lime green scrubs and a matching hospital cap. The kind that cinches around your head like a shower cap. I saw him the moment he came through the door. Was he coming for us? It was too soon, wasn't it? Had something gone wrong with Mr. Terupt's surgery? I stiffened. Then I noticed Jeffrey. He was practically hyperventilating. This place, and especially the sight of a doctor, triggered some horrible memories for him. I wrapped my arm around him and whispered, It's okay, just breathe. My mom also helped comfort him. She sat on the other side of Jeffrey and hugged him too. Mom knew his story. I had told her, but others stared at him, wondering why he was so worked up. The doctor didn't come over to us, and Jeffrey calmed down. Instead, the doctor made his way over to the knitting lady. I saw him take a deep breath as he got closer to her, and I wondered if it was one of those big breaths you take in order to get ready to deliver bad news. He pulled a chair next to the knitting lady and sat down across from her. Once she realized he was there, her hands and yarn and needles all stopped working and rested in her lap. Her eyes looked into the doctor's face. His lips never moved, but his head shook from side to side, and his face expressed sorrow. The knitting lady's strong chin dropped. The yarn and needles fell to the ground, and her hands covered her face. She began to shake silently, with lonesome tears. The doctor placed a hand on her back. He said, I'm very sorry. He waited for a while, then rose and walked out of the room. I felt silent tears trickling down my cheeks. I looked at my friends and saw some of them with tears too. I was scared, but I wasn't alone. The next chapter is Jeffrey, the slacker. Hard to breathe. So many bad memories. Bad news everywhere. I saw the doc walk in. I couldn't catch my breath. Jessica noticed. She and her mom wrapped their arms around me and helped me calm down. The doc wasn't for us. He handed out his bad news to someone else. I know how that goes. I'm so sorry.
Mr. Rose?
The doc wasn't for us. He handed out this bad news to someone else. I know how that goes. I'm so sorry, the doc had told my family. That was all he had to say. We knew Michael was dead. The next chapter is Danielle, the pushover. Peter took the microphone. He still wasn't talking. He'd answer you if you asked him something, and we weren't ignoring him anymore. But for the most part, he stayed silent. And he never talked about Mr. Terupt or anything to do with the accident. I held my breath, along with everyone else, at least. That was what it felt like. I remember the time I said we should invite the collaborative kids to our holiday centers. I saw Mr. T wipe his eyes after I said that. I didn't know why then. Now I do. Peter put the microphone back on the table. The next chapter is Alexia, the queen bee. I took the mic again after hearing Peter, like I knew what he was talking about, understanding stuff about Teach that he didn't before. That was true for me too. Teach took me in the hall and said some stuff that I hated him for, really hated him. But all he did was tell me the truth. I didn't want to listen. I hated him and the truth. I stopped talking, but I didn't pass the mic yet. I was thinking. I hope Teach wakes up soon so he can see that I've listened, I added. He helped me. I'd like him to know that. I put the microphone back on the table. Peter picked it up again. The next chapter is Peter, the class clown. I decided to pick up the microphone again and say one more thing. Maybe talking about Mr. T and sharing memories would help him pull through the surgery. Surgery. Brain surgery. I couldn't believe he had to have brain surgery all because of me. Because of the snowball I threw. My thoughts always came back to this. I remember the time I flung that frisbee. Mr. T said a few things to me, but that was it. I remember the puddle on the floor. He said a few things, but that was it. Nothing bad ever happens, I thought. I chucked that snowball. No matter what any of you say, it's all my fault. It always will be. I stopped talking so that I could fight back my tears, but I didn't put down the microphone. I wasn't done yet. I'm sorry, I said as I looked around at everyone. I'm sorry you're here because of me. I let the microphone roll back onto the table. No one had time to respond because another doctor walked in, and this time he was our man. The next chapter is Jessica, the new girl. Act 11, Scene 3. The door to the waiting room pushed open and another doctor walked in. Same lime green scrubs and matching cap. This doctor also wore a face mask tied around his face. Jeffrey started hyperventilating again. Mom and I calmed him. We held hands on Jeffrey's lap. I squeezed Mom's hand and she squeezed back. Was this it? The doctor reached behind his head and untied the mask. He was our guy. I saw him take that deep breath as he walked towards us. Next chapter is Luke, the brain. I saw Dr. Wilkins approach us. My heart took off like a car that had its gas pedals mashed to the floor. Please, please, please have good news, I repeated over and over in my head. Mom squeezed my shoulder. Dr. Wilkins found a chair and sat with us. Good news, gang, he said. Mr. Terupt made it through the surgery. Our faces broke into a many smiles and we let out our breaths of relief. I gave Mom a little hug. We were able to stop the bleeding, but your teacher remains in a coma, Dr. Wilkins continued. Why? Anna said. I thought that if you stopped the bleeding, he'd wake up. Her voice rose and shook a little. I thought that was what's supposed to happen. Anna spoke for all of us, but instead of Dr. Wilkins answering, Jeffrey did. Now it's wait and see, Jeffrey said. He took a deep breath in and let it out slow. That the bleeding stopped is a good sign. Deep breath. But that doesn't guarantee Terupt will wake up. We have to wait and see. More deep, slow breathing. Why was he so anxious? Has difficulties made me realize that he hasn't visited the hospital, but always seemed interested in my report? What was Jeffrey's deal? That's right. We wait and see and keep hoping, Dr. Wilkins said. Can we see him? Peter said. Not today, Peter. Mr. Terupt is in a post-surgical room being watched carefully. Why does he need to be watched carefully? Anna asked, her voice barely a whisper. I thought he was okay now. We monitor every patient closely after a major surgery. It's normal, Dr. Wilkins promised. Mr. Terupt is doing well at this point. We sat there looking at him like a team that had just lost their big guy. Hey guys, don't give up now, Dr. Wilkins said. This is when your teacher needs you most. This is good news today. And then Anna came through with the clutch. She took the lead and said what we needed to hear. He's going to make it. Trust me on this one. Be positive. Mr. Terupt told me that once, and he was right. The next chapter is Jeffrey, the slacker. It was wait and see for Michael, too. He didn't make it. That was when Mom and Dad's lives suddenly crashed down different paths. I don't know if their paths will ever come together again, but it's okay to hope. I hope Terupt makes it. I'm trying hard to believe, Anna. And that's where we'll stop.